I have a confession to make, to be totally honest with you. I do not like dim sum. Some of you are like, "What? No, how could you not like dim sum?" Others are like, "Bro, I feel you." And others you're like, "What's dim sum?" Don't worry, you're good. Right? People, so I have some friends who love dim sum, and when I say that, or when they say, "Oh, let's go for dim sum," and I have that wrinkle on my face, they're like, "What? No. Where did you have dim sum? I know where it wasn't good. Trust me, I'll take you to a really good place." And I'm like, "No, I'm not interested. I'm good." And they're like, "No, no, you must have eaten at the wrong place." And this is not like a thinly veiled attempt to get you to invite me to your favorite dim sum place. I will not go. It's not because of you. It has everything to do with dim sum. Here's what I realized though. That's how a lot of people feel. A lot of my friends, family, some of my extended family or whatever, neighbors, people I used to work with, when I would mention the word church or want to invite them to church, they would either in their head, I could see it, or on their face, that wrinkle of like, oh yeah, no, I had a bad experience. Yeah, oh, not trying that. Tried that, didn't go well. I was sick after. Like, no, I don't want to do that. Um, and as I talk, I'm like, no, 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 what happened? And then they'll tell me about the church or the religion or the priest or the pastor, or maybe it was a pushy grandparent or parents who are hypocritical about their faith. And they're like, no, I tried that bad experience. I don't want to do it. Or I read that article or I talked to a friend and you should see this. Or I watched that movie, that expose. This is bad. I don't want that. And I'm like, no, 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 no. You should try it. And they're not interested. You know what I realized is how I put words to it. And I think I've mentioned this a few times before. I came to realize that many of the people I knew had walked away from a Jesus they had never met because of their church experience, because of their religious experience, because of a pastor, a priest, or a family member or something. That it was not actually Jesus. All the things that they were saying, no, I had a bad experience, had nothing to do with Jesus, and yet they were never going to be a part of that again. And so several years later, when I had the opportunity to join a group of people in planting a church, many of us were like, hey, how do we start a church for our friends and family and people, our neighbors and coworkers who are in that place, who have walked away from a Jesus they've never actually met? We're not a perfect group of people. We don't have all the answers. But if we could, to the best of our ability, start a community where Jesus would be at the center, where if people came in contact with us and interacted with us and came to one of our gatherings, that they would have a chance to meet and know and maybe love and follow Jesus. If we could do that, that would be amazing. And so 20 years later, that has continued to fuel us as a church. And over these last several weeks, as we've been celebrating our 20th anniversary and heading into our next decade, we've been talking about what does it mean for us to be for? What are we for as a church? What is the well about? Where have we been and where are we going? We started several weeks ago with saying, yeah, we want to be for Jesus. We want to be a community with Jesus at the center. And then let him finish that sentence every week. Jesus, and according to scripture, and what do you think our church should be for? And I want to land the plane today with kind of the last sentence and the last part of what I believe our church is meant to be for. And to do that, I want to use a passage of scripture that we actually used last week. It was a passage that I had read, I think, many times, probably in my teens and early 20s, because I tried to read through the Bible every couple of years. So I'm sure I had read this chapter, but used to just ignore it until I got to be a part of a community like this, a church that we were planting together. And then as I became the pastor, this passage became like one of the most important ones, like a beacon, or like, can I say this, an alarm bell for me as a pastor and for us as a church of what God wants us to be for. Let me read it for you. It's sections from a book by the prophet Isaiah, but it's really God speaking to his people, his church, us, as what he wants us to be for. And here's what he says. This is God speaking to us. Free those who are wrongly imprisoned. Lighten the burden of those who work for you. Let the oppressed go free and remove the chains that bind people. Share your food with the hungry and give shelter to the homeless. Give clothes to those who need them, and do not hide from relatives who need your help. Feed the hungry and help those in trouble. Then your light will shine out from the darkness, and the darkness around you will be as bright as noon. The Lord will guide you continually, giving you water when you are dry and restoring your strength. You will be like a well-watered garden, like an ever-flowing spring. Some of you will rebuild the deserted ruins of your cities. Then you will be known as a rebuilder of walls and a restorer of homes. Friends, God is calling his people, his church, the well, to be for the places where we live. This passage, even as I said to you last week, was God saying to them, hey, look out your front door, the needs that are right in front of you. There are people who need food. There are people who are homeless, who need housing. There are people who need clothes, who don't have the means to get by with the basic needs for life that you have, that you could share with them. And then look what he says in verse 12. You will be a rebuilder of walls and a restorer of homes. This is speaking about the well-being of the city, of the place. The walls were like the things that represented the stability and safety and thriving of a city. And then the homes were the actual relationships and people, the marriages, the people, the children, the vitality, the social fabric of the community where they live. And God was saying to them, hey, look out your front door. There are needs everywhere. I want you to do something about this. If you really love me, if you're my people, you will care about these needs that are right in front of your face. And last week we talked about what does that mean for us as individuals. And if you missed that message, I would love for you to be able to go back and see that and watch it. But today I want to talk about what does that mean for us as a church in our 3 locations in Vaughan, in Bolton, and King City. And so we're going to do that in 2 parts. I'm kind of going to do part 1, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tony, your site pastor here in Bolton, to talk about, okay, specifically, what does this mean for us, for the place where we live here in Bolton? To do that, and kind of for my part, I want to share with you, the great conviction or insight that I had, that we had as a church was like, hey, people have walked away from a Jesus they've never met. So how can we create a place where they can meet him? But then 4 convictions that grew that really have shaped our identity as a church, not only in the past 20 years, but where we need to be going as God has called us to be for the place where we live. The first conviction was this. I was thinking about the fact that, like, if I was inviting a friend or a family member or whatever, or a neighbor or something to church, and they were living in the GTA, the largest city, 3rd largest city in North America. Just Toronto proper is the 3rd largest city in North America. New York, Los Angeles, Toronto. Then the GTA, over 8 million people in this sprawling urban and suburban kind of area that we live in. That they commute to work, and they commute to their kids' soccer game, and they commute to go see their parents or grandparents. They're not going to commute to church on Sunday when they don't even want to go to church, right? If presently they don't think that the church and the church community has any relevance in their lives, why are they going to drive 30 or 40 minutes to get to one? Which for us was like, hey, if we wanted our friends and neighbors and teammates to meet Jesus through a church, we needed to have a church in the place where they lived. Right? That as this city continues to grow and we're starting new communities with new schools and new Walmarts and new playgrounds, there need to be new churches. Well, whose responsibility is that? The government? No, it's the church. It's the church's responsibility to start churches in the place where we are. So we decided in 2015, 10 years in, that we were going to be a multi-site church. That instead of just growing bigger in one place, all these other pockets in the GTA we were connected to by boroughs. Every borough was 20 minutes away from every other one. We're going to start new communities where the places where people are, so they can hopefully come to one of our gatherings, interact with our people, with us, and somehow eventually meet and know and love and follow Jesus. Secondly, we thought as we go into these communities, we realized, and maybe you've realized this too, maybe you felt like this in your own life, or certainly you have people in your life who feel like this, that God was kind of against them, that God was uninterested in their daily life. Many people had experiences with the church and it was boring or irrelevant. And what that said to them was, God is not interested in your daily life. Or it was shame-based and guilt-ridden, and they were like, God is against you. So if we were going to plant in these communities, we needed the people in the communities to know and feel and believe that we were interested in their everyday lives and that we were for them and not against them. That we needed to be for our communities, that we need to be interested in the people and the concerns and the issues in our particular communities to show that God was for them and not against them. Number 3. I came across this study by the Cardis group called the Halo Effect. And what they were trying to do with this study was to say, hey, is church just for the benefit of the people who go to that church or who are part of that community? Or is there a halo effect? In other words, a broader impact socially and economically on the communities where churches are being planted? And part of the reason they were doing the study is it's very easy, and I've even heard politicians and people who have to deal with zoning and churches saying, we have enough churches, we don't need more churches, that's not going to help the city. And Cardis was saying, no, what if we looked at, well, what broader impact does the church actually benefit those who don't go to church? Does it actually benefit the city socially and economically? And here's the stunning results they found of this. And you can actually go on their website, Cardis, you can Google halo effect. You can type in the postal code of the city where you live in to say, what's the halo effect of a church in this area on the broader city? They found on average in urban centers that for every dollar the church spends on the city to help it, to care for it, to run programs for it, to serve it, the city would have to spend over $3 to get the same effect. In other words, the church is 3.5 times more effective in its social and well-being programs in the community than any government program could. And not that we're against government programs, just saying, no, but we are an army of servants. Most of you that serve as a part of our church and in our communities and community events, you're not paid for this. So it costs $0 for you to be having the impact that you're having. Way more efficient than whatever government-funded program could run. Secondly, I think the reason there's a halo effect is not just that we're economically more efficient, but as we care for the homes, as Isaiah says, that you will be a restorer of homes. That as we care for marriages, we've done marriage courses and marriage counseling and pre-marriage counseling, as we build up marriages and relationships within our community, as we help and mentor each other, as we help parents of young kids or children who are part of our youth or kids programs grow in their sense of self and identity and get free from anxiety or depression or fear, as they feel relationally safe, as we invest in the relationships and homes in our community, as Abraham Lincoln says, the strength of a nation lies in the homes of its people. That the social impact of the broader community is exponentially more as the church is present. And so, therefore, our conviction was a church can be 3 times more effective than any government program at meeting the needs of the people around us. We need to have churches in our cities. And then fourthly, wherever the community of Jesus is for any length of time, listen to this, wherever the community of Jesus is for any length of time throughout the world through his church, the rights and well-being of women and children are upheld, and access to healthcare and education increase. Friends, this is true around the world, and this is a very inconvenient truth for those who want to say that our nation doesn't need churches or God anymore. People who live in Canada might say, oh yeah, of course, women and children are equal members of society and should have equality to men and access to everything. And of course, people who are poor or marginalized communities of society should have equal access to education and healthcare. Of course, doesn't everybody think that? No, everybody does not think that. In fact, if you go to countries and places where the community of Jesus followers have not been for hundreds of years like they have in our country, what you will find is women and children generally are oppressed or treated as second-class citizens or even property. And the poor and the marginalized and the uneducated have to fight for themselves, and there is not an equal distribution of access to healthcare and education. But if you we're not a Christian nation. I don't even know what that means. But what I do know is where there have been community of Jesus followers for hundreds of years, you will find the rights of women and children upheld. And we still have a long way to go, but equality fought for, and equal access to healthcare and education for the poor and the marginalized groups. Anywhere Jesus communities are, this is what you have. Because God, for centuries, has been telling his people, free the oppressed, feed the hungry, care for the poor, lift up the rights of those who are being pushed down. This is what it means for my church, my people, to be for the places where I have put them. And friends, it is these 4 convictions that have shaped us as a church. That if people are going to come to church and somehow meet Jesus, they need to have a community, a Jesus community where they live. And that in that community, the people need to know that God and the church are interested in their everyday lives and are for them and not against them. That churches are an essential component for cities to thrive socially, economically, and spiritually. And that wherever Jesus communities are, as we concern ourselves with the things that concern the heart of God, the rights of women and children are upheld, and the poor and the weak and the marginalized and the uneducated have access to healthcare and education. This is why we want to be for the places where we live. It's what God has been growing in our hearts. It's what we want him to do more of in the years to come. And so now I want to turn it over to your site pastor, Tony, to talk about, okay, practically speaking, what does that mean for us here in Bolton as we would be for this city, the place where we live?